EQU by ChoiceCenter Leadership University is where emotional intelligence meets extraordinary results. Founded in 1998 in Las Vegas, ChoiceCenter has empowered thousands of people around the world to unlock their full potential through experiential trainings and coaching. Here on EQU, we dive into the inspiring stories and transformative journeys from both famous faces and everyday heroes. Graduates who have harnessed emotional intelligence to have transformed their lives in ways that are nothing short of remarkable. From skyrocketing their careers to deepening relationships, balancing creative pursuits with focusing on health, finances, and family. Our guests share the real-world impact of EQ on living a life you author and love. Get ready to be inspired, challenged, and equipped with insights that can serve you to create radical results in your own life. If you're ready to dream, declare, and deliver, let EQU show you what's possible.
Welcome to EQU, the podcast where we dive deep into the power of emotional intelligence and how it transforms lives, relationships, and careers. I'm Corrine Clement, COO of ChoiceCenter.
And I'm Robyn Williams, CEO of ChoiceCenter Leadership University. And we are thrilled for you to meet today's guest. He is someone who is the embodiment of grace under pressure, mastery through repetition, and leadership through presence. Henry Akins is a legend in the world of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and a celebrated Mitsui practitioner. Henry trained under Rickson Gracie and is the fastest to ever earn a black belt from Rickson, doing it in just 8 years, beating the next fastest record holders by 6 and 8 years. In high demand, Henry teaches and trains around the world to sell out crowds who long to learn the deeper, more refined layers of the art that he is so skilled at, what some call invisible jiu-jitsu. His mastery is so precise, it feels effortless. But behind that flow is a lifetime of commitment, curiosity, and humility.
If you've ever trained with Henry or just heard him teach in person or through his YouTube channel or hiddenjujitsu.com website, you know there's something different about his presence. That difference is emotional intelligence.
Henry is a graduate of ChoiceCenter's LV 144 from 2014 and has completed every single course we offer. He's also an extraordinary leadership coach. He brings EQ to the mat and jiu-jitsu to life. Today, we'll explore how martial arts and mindset intersect, how Henry became one of the most sought-after teachers in the world, and what principles you can take from the dojo into your daily life.
Yes, if you're an EQ enthusiast or a martial artist looking to master discipline, resilience, and peak performance, this episode is for you. Get ready for insights into the mind of a true master and welcome the man who moves with purpose, teaches with presence, leads with heart, and has a black belt in life. Henry, welcome to EQU.
Hey, how are you guys doing? Thank you for having me on.
We're
really
thrilled
excited
to have
Henry.
you.
It's such a gift, Henry, to have you with us. What first drew you into martial arts?
Gosh, I had always been fascinated with martial arts since I was young. So growing up in an Asian household, my mom being Vietnamese, like really when I was growing up, the only kind of male action stars on TV were martial arts stars. And so my mom would usually go out shopping on Saturdays and leave me and my brothers at home. And on Saturday afternoons, we would watch Kung Fu Theater all day. So that was what was playing on TV. That was kind of the only kind of Asian role models that we had growing up. But it always fascinated me. There's a very common story within all of these martial arts movies, and it's like a young guy gets wronged, or there's some bad guys, and he has to fight back. He has to learn how to fight back. And usually he gets beat up or something happens in the beginning, and then he finds a master, and this master teaches him the way. And with his kind of newfound powers, he's able to go out and right wrongs or do good. And so that's a very, very common theme in all these martial arts movies, is some old master will teach a young, kind of very physical, but unskilled apprentice. And then the apprentice, with his knowledge and skill, can basically protect people that he loves or beat up the bad guys or do the right thing. And so that was always a very, very powerful story for me, just having knowledge and skill, allowing you to be able to basically do what's right.
Wow. I love that. There seem to be a lot of martial arts out there, Henry. Jiu-Jitsu, karate, Muay Thai. I'm sure there's others. Let's do a little 101 background for our listeners. What are the differences between these practices?
Well, all the martial arts have different skill sets and different techniques. Some of them are more stand-up and striking based, like karate and taekwondo. Jiu-jitsu tends to be grappling based. So jiu-jitsu, for those people that have never seen it before, which is probably very rare nowadays, but jiu-jitsu is very similar to wrestling. Most of the techniques are ground-based, and the goal in jiu-jitsu is to dominate your opponent and put him into a position where he has to give up. And we usually force the person to give up either with chokes or strangulations or joint manipulations. Basically, we secure a joint, we start to bend it in a direction that it's not supposed to bend, and normally do it in a very controlled way so that the person has time to give up or submit. But I think nowadays most people are very, very aware of jiu-jitsu because it's what really made the UFC. So if anybody watches UFC, if anybody's been exposed to mixed martial arts, then you've probably have seen jiu-jitsu. And Joe Rogan, who is the commentator in the UFC, he's done an amazing job educating people on jiu-jitsu.
He really has, Henry, because since I've known you guys, I feel like watching him has educated me along with what I get to hear from you, Scott, Ed. It's been great. I'd love to know, I know a black belt is the best, but would you explain the different belt colors in martial arts and what achievements they actually represent?
So different martial arts and different styles will have different belts. And even within the same martial art, even within like karate, there's different branches of karate or different styles of karate. They will all have different belt system. Really what the belt system is for is really just a way for the instructor to acknowledge their students that they're making progress. I think traditionally what happened back in the old days from legend or from stories is traditionally the martial artists would wear a white uniform. They call it a gi or kimono. And the white uniform symbolizes purity of spirit. And that's what the training is, supposed to do is like purify the spirit. And, we'll talk about that later, but everyone starts off with a white belt. And what happens is over time, you're not supposed to wash your belt because the belt is supposed to contain like all of the training. And so over time, that belt would eventually turn brown and then black from all of your blood and sweat and, dirt on it and whatever. So a lot of the traditional martial arts, like going back, there was only a white, a brown, and a black belt. But now what happens is different schools and different styles give out belts. Some people do it as a way to make money, but other schools do it just as a way for the instructor to acknowledge the students that they're making progress.
Wow, I love that. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, me either. That's fascinating.
And so in jiu-jitsu, we have 5 belts. There's white, which is everybody starts off as a white belt. And then you have the blue belt, which is the second belt. Then it goes to purple, then it goes to brown, and then it goes to black. And then once you hit black, there's degrees. And those are just the degrees on the black belt are just given as basically time served. Basically, however long you've been a black belt, you get degrees.
Oh, that's so neat. I love that. You're known, Henry, for being the youngest to earn a black belt from the legendary Rickson Gracie, whose family founded jiu-jitsu, right?
Right. So at the time that I had got my black belt, I was the youngest and the fastest. I was the 3rd American to get a black belt from Rickson. I don't know if that's changed now, but at the time, I was the first generation of Americans to start training jiu-jitsu. I was in that first group of Americans to start training. And Rickson's family, the Gracie family, is who originally brought jiu-jitsu over to the United States and introduced pretty much to the world the art. And, one of the ways that they really gained a lot of exposure with it is through the UFC. So the UFC started in 1993. It was a very, very different, it was really, really different back then. Back then, the fights it was a 16-man tournament. So nowadays, what happens in the UFC is you have bouts where 2 people agree to fight each other, and there's a very set time limit. It's either 3 5-minute rounds or 5 5-minute rounds. And your opponent 10 to 12 weeks in advance, and you're both required to make a certain weight. So when the UFC first started, it was a 16-man tournament. And so you had to fight 3 guys in one night to win the tournament. There was no rules. So the only rules were no biting and no eye gouging, but you could headbutt. So the idea behind that was they didn't want to discriminate against any martial art, and they didn't want any martial art to complain like, hey, you're not allowing us to use our most dangerous techniques. So they made it so that basically you can use almost any technique. So groin strikes were allowed. You could punch people in the throat, all of these techniques that people consider very, very deadly. So it was a 16-man tournament. You had to fight 3 guys in one night to win. There was no time limit. So pretty much no rules besides no biting no biting and no eye gouging, no time limit. So that means you could fight for 2 minutes or you could fight for 2 hours straight, nonstop. And there was no weight division. So you could fight the first guy and he might be 150 pounds and then your next guy might be 600 pounds. And they had a sumo wrestler. In the very first UFC, there was actually a guy that had been representing sumo. So in the early days of the UFC, the idea was let's find out what is the most effective martial art. So it was a competition where they took specialists from all the different martial arts styles and made them fight each other. So back then it wasn't even called mixed martial arts. So the term mixed martial arts didn't even exist. Back then, the label of the event, it was called no holds barred, which means basically there was no rules. And so, yeah, that's kind of like a brief introduction to the UFC. So the winner of the first UFC was a guy named Royce Gracie, who was my instructor, Rickson Gracie's younger brother. So Royce won the first UFC in under 5 minutes. He beat all 3 opponents in under 5 minutes combined and basically won the whole tournament without taking one punch.
Whoa.
Then he won the second tournament as well. And the second tournament, they had to fight 4 guys in one night because what they realized after the first event, because there was no gloves, the guys were not able to wear gloves or pads at all, is that a lot of guys, they would win the fight, but they would punch someone in the head. They would win the fight and they would end up breaking their hand. And so they couldn't continue on to the next fight. And so they had to put in some alternate fighters. And so you had to fight 4 guys in one night to win the second one. And so Royce Gracie ended up winning that one. He ended up winning his first match in the third event, but pulled out after that. But then ended up coming back and winning the fourth UFC as well, 3 guys in one night. His final opponent in that UFC was a guy named Dan Severn, who was a wrestler that outweighed him by 100 pounds. So Royce was about 170. Dan Severn was about 270, 260. So outweighed him by almost 100 pounds. And the fight lasted 14 minutes. And after 14 minutes, Royce was able to finish him. So that was pretty impressive because Dan Severn had been grappling since the time he was a child. And he was actually an Olympic alternate in wrestling. So it kind of proved the effectiveness after those first few UFCs. It kind of proved the effectiveness of Jiu-Jitsu as the single most effective martial art. And what happened after that is all other martial artists started to incorporate Jiu-Jitsu into their training. So if you were a karate guy or a taekwondo guy, it really exposed the weaknesses in their styles that if somehow the fight ended up grappling and if the fight ended up on the ground, that those people that had trained those styles were very, very compromised. So they all started training grappling. And so that's really how the creation of mixed martial arts came about, or MMA came about, is all the other martial arts styles realized that there was massive holes in their game and they weren't able to compete effectively. So they all started training jiu-jitsu.
Wow, that's impressive, isn't it? Wow.
You said you were the first American to start to really study jiu-jitsu.
First generation of American. Yeah, there was a first kind of generation of Americans coming up. I started in 1995. The first UFC was 1993. Well, I actually started in 94. I had moved to LA by the summer of 95 to start training with Rickson. And so the first UFC was 93. The first time I trained with Rickson was November of 94. And then by June of 95, I was living in LA training. And
so did you see like this take place on TV with the UFC and then say, gosh, I've got to go train with them? Or how did it come about?
Well, I knew, I had seen some footage before the UFC had come out. There was a video, old grainy VHS footage called Gracie in Action. And it was basically them doing challenge matches. What they did was they challenge any martial arts or anybody that wants to come in and fight one of the Gracies. They would give them $100,000 if they could win. And
whoa.
Yeah, so Corrine Gracie did a article in Playboy magazine back in the day. And the title of the article was called The Baddest Man on the Planet. And in that article, Corrine Gracie, who's my instructor's older brother, and he's kind of the oldest brother of the Gracie, the original Gracie brothers that most people, recognize. He was also the creator of the UFC. So he put in basically in the article, anyone that wants to come in and fight me or my brothers, if you can beat us, you'll get $100,000. Now they didn't have $100,000, but what it was a big promotional campaign. You had guys coming in from all over wanting to win that $100,000. And what they would do is they would film the fights. And it was literally them just kind of destroying martial artists, like all kinds of different martial artists and athletes and fighters, and some guys were street fighters, some guys were actually trained in different martial arts styles. And so it was just probably like 30-40 fights of them just destroying martial artist after martial artist after martial arts, and usually dispatching of them very, very easily. Sometimes, most of the times, the fighters, after they lost, they would want to go again, they would want to try again, because they said, oh, I could do better next time, or I messed up or something, and so they would, sometimes it was 2 or 3 times in a row they would do the same thing to the guys. So I saw that, and already I knew that, wow, that's, I was already looking for a martial art that was grappling based, because I grew up in Oklahoma around wrestlers. And so when I saw that, I realized that this is going to be it. This is like going to be the best martial art, because of how powerful grappling is and how powerful that dynamic is. Once the fight hits the ground, whoever dominates position, whoever can dominate position, is going to win the fight. And they had a very, very deep level of understanding of that.
You weren't trying to win the 100,000?
No, I definitely was not trying to win the 100,000. The first time I went into Hickson's, I was a young kid, but I was very tough. I was a very tough kid, very physical kid. I was working out a lot. And this is most people's first experience with jiu-jitsu. I literally got played with. Like, I was tapping out and giving up probably every 30, 40 seconds, and doing that against guys much, much smaller than me. They were literally playing with me, and it was so humbling. Sometimes that experience either breaks people or it inspires them, and it inspired me. It inspired me so much that I basically went home after that visit and came up with a game plan of how I was going to move to LA and how I was going to start training with Rickson full time. So,
is there something significant in this journey? Like, is it your training schedule, something you were striving for that the listeners would want to hear about? Like,
how'd you get that black belt? What did that take?
Well, for me, the black belt was just training, right? So when I first moved to LA, I was at the academy, at the school, 70 hours a week. So I would show up at 7 in the morning, and some nights I wouldn't go home till 7 at night, and some nights I wouldn't go home till 9 at night. So I was in, a 20-year-old kid. I didn't have any friends. I didn't know anybody in LA. I'd moved from Oklahoma to LA. Really, I was just kind of living at this school for the first couple of years. And because my mind was constantly on jiu-jitsu, it allowed me to progress really, really fast. But getting the black belt is really just, because there's no standard. Like, with the black belt, like, there's no such thing. There's no set standard between any instructor or any belt. So it's really just whenever your instructor wants to present you the belt. And with Rickson being so good, I knew that he had just such high standards to be able to get the belt. And so that's one of the things in jiu-jitsu, and one of the things in most martial arts, you're never supposed to ask for the belt. It's just given to you when you're ready. And so that was the thing for me, is I never asked for my belt. And even though I got mine very, very quickly, even when I got my belt, I never felt I was ready for it. I never felt like I was deserving of it, because Rickson is so good. Like, even by the time I got my black belt, he was still able to roll with me and it make me feel like I was a white belt, make me feel like I was a beginner, make me feel like I had no idea what I was doing, right? He could just play with me. And so I never felt like, even when I first got my black belt, that I deserved it or I was ready for it. I felt like, oh man, I wish I would have more time. Like, I need to get better to be able to, because it's a heavy burden getting the black belt. I think when most people get, and I've talked to so many people just years that have just gotten their black belts, and it's definitely it's a shift in mindset, because one, to other training partners, now you're a target. Now that you're a black belt, they want to see if they can beat you. So they put in a little bit extra effort because they want to be able to beat a black belt. So you become a bigger target. But also, people want to make their instructors proud. And so you want to represent the belt, right? And so, yeah, it's a heavy burden, the belt.
Were you doing that full time? Did you have a job? You said 70 hours.
Well, so originally I had saved up money for a couple months, and I was going to just find a job when I moved to LA. What ended up happening was, because I was there so much, they ended up, after 2 months, giving me a job as the secretary. So I was making $200 a week, basically being the secretary at the school. So I was living off of $800 a month. So I had a pretty tight budget. I had $400 that would go to my rent. I was renting a room and a house in El Segundo from an older lady. And then I had 100 something for my car insurance and money for gas. And then I had like $200 for groceries for the month. So I had basically $50 a week. So I would go to this store, this grocery store called Food for Less, which is in Hawthorne. Very, very, very cheap prices. on food. Yeah.
You're known worldwide for your teaching and technique, especially your deep understanding of something called invisible jiu-jitsu.
Some people call it invisible jiu-jitsu. I call it hidden jiu-jitsu. The idea behind that name is that there's a lot of subtleties in jiu-jitsu. So jiu-jitsu, when it's done right, feels like magic. It feels effortless, or it should feel effortless when it's done right. And to be able to do it at that high of a level where everything starts to feel effortless, it requires a lot of precision. There's a lot of minute details that make it feel effortless. So there's certain things called leverage and timing. How do you manipulate another human body? How do you basically attack another person? When you're training, that person is always trying to resist you, but how do you impose your will on that person? Even if they're a very strong individual, how do you attack them in areas where they're weak? And then the big philosophy behind the art is using your opponent's energy against them. And so a lot of times you'll go for something, they will resist. And when they resist, instead of insisting on what you're going for, instead of fighting what they're resisting, you use that energy against them. So you'll go for something, they'll resist, and then you take their resistance and then you use it to your advantage. So that's constantly what we're doing. It's very strategic. At the high level, it becomes much less physical and much more mental, the training. In the early stages, it's very, very physical because a lot of times people don't have the proper technique. They don't have the nuances. They don't have the details. And so everything feels like a struggle. But as you get better and better, it becomes more effortless.
What would you say sets you apart as a practitioner and a teacher?
Well, I think all the feedback that I've gotten over the years of what makes my jiu-jitsu or my style so different is a couple things. My understanding of weight distribution, understanding how to use your weight as a weapon, and understanding how to use my weight to create pressure. So like when I get on top of people, that's one of the most common feedback I get is like, gosh, how is it that you can create so much pressure when you're on top? People have said, I feel like I'm 400, 500, 600, 1,000 pounds when I get on top of them. So that's one thing. The other thing that I think a lot of people credit me for is the understanding of this idea of connection and disconnection, and also my understanding of the fundamentals. So I have a very, very deep understanding of the fundamentals, which is basically what you need to be able to achieve mastery. Like in order to achieve mastery in anything, it's just basically perfecting the fundamentals. And so that's what I've really focused on, is just really trying to perfect the fundamentals.
Wow. We've had a lot of UFC fighters here, Henry, both men and women. And I'm saying here at ChoiceCenter, attend the trainings and you're friends with every single one of them. How do you get them ready for a fight?
Well, with UFC fighters, with fighters in general, I mean, there's a lot to it. So usually what happens is they sign a bout agreement so that you know who they're fighting. And normally you'll study tape to see what the person does, see where their strengths and see where their weaknesses. I had an MMA gym in LA for 10 years, and I was the jiu-jitsu coach. And so my job is to help them and support them in that world where the fight goes into a clinch and where it ends up on the ground, basically preparing them on what they should do. Normally, one of the big things always that's very helpful is helping fighters get out of bad positions. So once they get stuck in a bad position, what they should be doing to basically be able to stay safe so that they don't lose the fight, and how that they can get out. And different fighters have different strengths and weaknesses. And so the idea is you always want the fight to go where your fighter is strong and where the other fighter is weak, or wherever your fighter might have the advantage over the other fighter. And so with mixed martial arts, with MMA, it becomes very complicated because there's kind of three main areas of fighting, or three disciplines. There's the stand-up part, which is the striking, like kicking and punching. There's the takedown or clinching part, which in that realm, that gets decided who gets to be on top or on bottom when the fight hits the ground. And then there's basically the ground part, which is how to win the fight on the ground, or how to stay safe and get out of really bad positions on the ground. So yeah, there's a lot to it when you're training fighters, because a lot of the UFC fighters, in a given week, they're doing about 12 trainings a week. So they're doing 2-a-days. They're training twice a day, once in the morning or afternoon and once in the evening. And between those 12 trainings, they're normally doing 3 jiu-jitsu style trainings a week, 3 striking style trainings a week, where they're focusing on their feet, because they have a lot to develop. They have a lot to learn. They have a lot to be good at. 3 wrestling trainings, and then they have 3 strength and conditioning trainings. And then on top of that, you have all their nutrition, which changes over the course of the camp. So usually it's a 10 to 12 week camp. Usually you know who you're going to fight weeks in advance. And so obviously, like the last 2 weeks, you start cutting weight. maybe even before that, depending on how much you weigh. So yeah, it's a very complicated process to basically prepare and train each fighter as it builds up to that particular fight, that particular bout, whoever they're fighting.
And do you live in the camp with them, or?
No, when they say camp, you're traveling with them during fight week. So wherever the fight is, you usually go with them that week whenever they fly out. Usually, like if the fight's on Saturday at the UFC, the fights are Saturday, people are flying in on Tuesday because then you have press to do throughout the week, and then the weigh-ins are Friday and then the fight's usually Saturday. So yeah, it's a very emotionally intense time because as coaches, you put so much into the success of your fighters, wanting the people that you're training to have success. It's very, very intense. So you're not living with them, but you're in constant communication. I mean, a lot of the fighters have families and homes, but you're in constant communication with them, checking in with them, coming up with a game plan, working with them every day on different aspects of their, of their style, their technique.
As you're answering that, what's coming across my mind is I'm learning a lot about you today, that had you be such an amazing, powerful, and on-point coach with us at ChoiceCenter for leadership, of course. Really, you've coached all the trainings. But I'm starting to understand that there's quite a crossover here of what might be complementary for students, both EQ and Jiu-Jitsu. And so when you're working with the fighters that you're speaking about that are not graduates, do you work as much with them on mindset? Is it more work on mindset as when you're working with a graduate who's done a lot of mindset work with EQ?
Yeah, it's constant. The mindset thing is so important for fighters. I think a lot of coaches will acknowledge or tell you that as much as they are a coach, they're also somewhat of a therapist. So you're constantly there. You're an emotional support too, a mental, emotional support, and also there to support them. There's so much involvement. Like as coaches, we put so much into the athletes. Kind of like what you were mentioning, Robyn, about the similarities. You're really trying to support another human being and another individual in achieving their dreams and their goals. And so with that, you're willing to do anything to help them achieve that. And sometimes they need the technical, sometimes they need a pep talk, sometimes they need more emotional support. Sometimes there's just things going on in their life which can affect training. Like anytime you have things going on in the home life. And so you're also an ear to lean on or to give advice. And a lot of times the athletes and the fighters look up to their coaches and have a certain level of respect for their coaches. Otherwise they wouldn't take advice from them. And so because of that relationship, you also often give them guidance in life.
That makes sense. Well, you're a graduate of ChoiceCenter's LV 144 all the way back to 2014. And you didn't
Crazy.
stop there, Henry. Amazingly, you've completed every single course that ChoiceCenter offers. We're going to have to come out with a new one. What initially brought you to the training room?
Well, Scott Nelson, my one of my best friends, who also was the first generation of Americans to start doing jiu-jitsu. So we kind of grew up together. He was training up in San Francisco and I was training down in LA, but we would run into each other all the time. We became good friends and we were in Costa Rica together. I was teaching a camp in Costa Rica and he said, I just did this amazing training. It was life-changing for me. It was one of the most powerful things I've ever done. I think you should do it. And I said, okay, sign me up. It was pretty easy.
Well, welcome, and we're thrilled that you said sign me up.
Yeah.
When you jumped in, Henry, what were a couple of your aha moments?
He didn't share with me what the training was about or what went on, so I had no idea what to expect. But one of the coachings he gave me is just give 100%. And Scotty actually coached that LV. I think Ed was there too, and I think maybe Danny was in it too. What were my aha moments? Well, definitely one of the big things for me that I knew about myself, but it really had a huge light on was how guarded I was in life and in general with people. I shared the story in the training. I share it here, but I had 3 of my best friends die 3 years in a row. And the story that I told myself is the closer that you let people get, the more you'll get hurt when they're gone. And all 3 of my friends were very young and totally unexpected. The story is people can die at any given moment. And the first one, my first friend that died was actually Rickson's son. And so we were training partners. And so when he died, I went into like a really deep depression, and I didn't train for almost 6 months. It was so hard to go back into the training room because I was so used to him being there with me to train. Um, that was one of the times when I thought I was going to give up doing jiu-jitsu, because it was just so difficult. And it took me quite a bit of time to work through that. And then, like 6 months, I start training and I start feeling a little bit better, and time's going by, and then my other best friend passed away 6 months after that. And he was in New Jersey, and he was wrestling for the WWE. He had just signed a contract with his brother, and they were wrestling. And he fell asleep on the couch with his fiance, and he died. And I think, I'm not sure, but what some people assume is maybe because he was doing steroids. He was taking a lot of steroids to bulk up, and he had either a blood clot that happened and a blood vessel burst in his leg while he was sleeping, and so he died. So going back to what you had mentioned about my aha moments was, I was extremely guarded, and I would let people in, but only so much. But one of the things I realized is there's no way that you're going to be able to have deep relationships if you keep operating like this, and be able to have the type of relationships that you want, the close friendships, and just accepting in order to have those deep relationships, there's also going to be pain involved, right? Or the possibility of experiencing severe pain. And actually, one of the most powerful feedback I got was from Catherine, who was my coach. And this is so crazy because I remember it. She called me a coward, and it infuriated me so much because I'm like, this lady doesn't know. Like, my initial, it was like, this lady doesn't know me. She doesn't know what he's talking about. But the more I thought about it, it was true. I was kind of living my life because I was afraid of being hurt, just being very, very guarded, not wanting to be hurt by people. And so I wasn't letting people in. And so that was my biggest learning takeaway from the first weekend.
There is quite a parallel here as I'm listening to you today. What do you think the strongest parallel? That's an amazing example. Strongest parallel between the mat and the classroom?
Gosh, there's so many parallels. Well, there's a lot of deep reflection going on in both environments. A lot of deep reflection because the training exposes the holes and weaknesses and areas in your practice that need work. Because just like in life, people are doing the best they can and they're trying very hard to do the best that they can. But then under pressure and difficult situations and obstacles, like all of these things come up. And so there's a lot of self-reflection going on. And anybody that's doing jiu-jitsu wants to get better. Same thing with the work. It's everybody wants to become a better version of themselves, right? And to be able to do that takes time and commitment and struggle. It's not easy. So a lot of people say jiu-jitsu is one of the most physically, emotionally, and mentally difficult things that they've done. And I would say with, the EQ work, I say it kind of compares on the emotional, probably emotional way more, but mentally and emotionally challenging.
I love the parallel. I'm learning a lot from you today, Henry, about the trainings as you're talking. And I think what came to me is the question came right out about samurai and masters both. What I'm imagining is that both of those trainings have a lot of deep parallels. You've taken both. And what would be the value for martial artists? What would be the value for them of the samurai or the masters, or maybe there's crossovers?
Well, I think with martial artists are already doing a lot of the things in samurai. So there's parallels there. But in the martial arts, you're doing it at a much more physically intense level. I think samurai is amazing for people that have not done martial arts, to give people exposure to the amount of discipline and mental toughness and faith and that is required to be able to do the martial arts at a high level. But masters is really interesting because it's a completely different way of thinking. I think I shared this with you before. One of the parallels that is really powerful with both the trainings is your success in martial arts and in life is 100% your responsibility. It's 100% on you. That's a huge one because when you compete in team sports, you can always blame someone else for the failures. But because jiu-jitsu is more of an individual sport, there's no one else to blame but yourself. So if you're losing, if you're getting beat up, if you're getting tapped out, it's all on you. And because it's so difficult and humbling, people really want to try to get better. And I think that's very similar with the work. We're really big on whatever happens being in the place of 100% responsibility. Our life, whatever happens, it's all on us. So it's the same on the mats.
I was watching one of your intro videos on your Jiu-Jitsu website, and there was a parallel for me. So maybe you can speak into that. But said Jiu-Jitsu is common sense, and that's why it works. And a lot of times, I think the training it's largely simplistic. Are you being a victim? Are you responsible? Is that a factor? Is that interpretation? So do you
Yeah.
see any of those similarities?
Yeah, no, you know what it is, Corrine? Everything in the training is common sense as well. It all makes sense. It's all kind of very logical. And that's why I think the first week in discovery is so important, is identifying the problems. Like once you start to identify the problems, once you can start to see what's holding you back, that's kind of the first step in getting better or improving or making progress. But the first thing is just identifying and acknowledging, this is where my weaknesses are. This is the areas in my life. And a lot of times those are the things that are so hard for people to identify. It's so hard because once you can identify, that's the first step in being able to solve a problem, is just identify what is the problem. And that's what I meant by when I said everything in jiu-jitsu is common sense, because in jiu-jitsu, everything is common sense, because basically what happens is when you're training, everything your opponent's trying to do is to your detriment. Basically, they're trying to do the exact opposite as you. Anything that you're trying to do is not to their benefit. And so basically you have two people trying to dominate each other. And so the idea behind that is anything he wants, I can't allow him to have anything he wants, because anything that he's trying to do is to my detriment. And anything I'm trying to do is not to his benefit. So we're both trying to stop each other. And once you start to break things down and understand things on a very simplistic level, a deep level, like, oh, he wants to grab this arm. And the reason he wants to grab this arm is because he's going to throw me in this direction and I'm going to fall. So, and I can't put my hand out. So if he keeps throwing me in this direction, when he grabs my hand, then don't let him grab my hand. So when I start to teach, I try to break things down and make it very, very simple for people to understand. And you know, one of the main feedbacks I always get is like, man, you explained it in a way that it just makes sense, or I've known this my whole life, or I've seen this, but nobody's ever explained it that way before. And so I think that's really what the benefit is being able to break things down on a very, very simple level. And I think that's a big thing that we do in the trainings, is break things down on such a simple, basic level. I mean, the whole training is understanding how your mind works, understanding how, you know, your belief systems get developed and why you have these belief systems, and then how do we go about shifting that mindset, shifting that consciousness, right? But the first thing again is, you know, we have all these unconscious patterns. And so you have to become conscious of it first. One of the big things in the trainings is that we're just on autopilot. Human beings are just on autopilot most of our lives. And we're just reacting based on past events and that have molded us a certain way. So now we have to bring all of that to the conscious mind, identify, is this serving us or not? So that's the same thing in jiu-jitsu. What am I doing? What is he doing? Is this serving me? Is what he's doing serving me? Is this helping me? No, then I need to do something different.
Beautiful.
I love the parallels that I'm hearing in detail today. I've learned a lot of what we're talking about just over the years that we've all had together, but today the parallels are even more clear for me. What role does humility play in mastery, Henry? So I hear an incredible parallel in mastery in jiu-jitsu, mastery in the EQ trainings, and you're a legend. So I would love to hear how you keep your ego in check, both on the mat and off.
Gosh, well, I think it's very simple. The people that achieve extremely high level in anything are the ones that are constantly working to improve. And in order to have that mindset, it means that you have to do things different than the way that you're already doing if you want to be better. And so without a humble mindset and approach, it's very difficult, because if you think you already know it all, if you think you're the best, if you think that everything that you're doing is right, you know, then there's no room left for growth. And what's surprising and amazing to me is, you know, I've had the opportunity to work with some of the best people in their respective fields, some of the top people in the world. And a lot of those people also tend to be the people that are the most hungry for growth, and that are the ones constantly looking to improve. And they're willing to put in the work as well. So to get good, to be the best in the world, means you're constantly looking to get better, because the highest level, it's literally a matter of like millimeters who's number one. And so if you're not constantly looking to get better, you're going to get surpassed. Right. And so in order to get better, it has to be saying what I'm doing is not good enough. There's something that needs to change because there's no growth in staying the same.
Did you go into all of this training because you wanted to be a fighter? Did you ever fight, or did you always want to train other people?
Well, I was 20 years old, and so I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to train at the time, and still to this day, there's not really a lot of money in it. What's sad is, so the UFC is the biggest organization for MMA, and I would say there's probably maybe 3% of the fighters that have fought in the organization, maybe less, actually have retirement money. Now, part of the problem is also most athletes are not financially responsible. But again, there's not the amount of money in the UFC as there is in a lot of other sports. I'll give you an example. Royce, he won that first event, the first UFC. He had to fight 3 guys in one night to win. That means you have to fight one guy. You have to get out of that fight uninjured so that you can go on to fight the second guy. Now, the second guy you're fighting, there's no way you can prepare for any of your opponents because you don't know who you're fighting. Maybe you know who the first guy is, but you don't know who the second guy is, and you don't know who the third guy is, right? So there's no way to prepare. So you have to prepare for everybody. So he wins that event, 3 guys in one night, bare knuckle. Back then people were getting their, heads split open, and he made $60,000 for that, winning a tournament, which is kind of crazy. So that was the money around in the days when I first started training, which is basically nothing, and usually people are training for months and months. Like even in the UFC nowadays, most fighters are fighting twice a year. So let's say average, you're getting 70, 80, maybe $150,000 to fight, but you're paying your manager, you have a nutritionist, you have coaches. So there's all these expenses that go along with training and people that are paid out. So there's really not that much money in fighting. But when I first started training, I just did it because I loved it. There was no example for me of anybody making an amazing living teaching jiu-jitsu because, again, I was the first generation of Americans, and so there was not like jiu-jitsu schools everywhere. So what has happened in the last few years with jiu-jitsu and its growth and how big it's gotten and how popular it is, and that I can actually have a comfortable life doing something that I love is literally mind-boggling to me. I am in constant gratitude that my life ended up working out, because it was literally a constant stress throughout my life that I was committing all of this time into doing jiu-jitsu because I loved it. I did it because I loved it, because I was so passionate about it. And it helped me in so many ways, mentally, emotionally, physically. But that I could actually make a living doing this is, I'm in like constant gratitude about it. I mean, like dream come true, dream life for me, that I get to do what I love. And I don't have to put on a suit and tie and go into an office every day.
And you know what, Henry? You show up like you're constantly in gratitude. You're one of the most humble, best examples of humility and resilience and contribution. And you're just always up for making a difference for someone else. And I had a lesson, and I won't use a name just out of respect for that couple, but we have a good friend who recently had a very severe injury. And one of the most incredible experiences I had was watching you be so caring and immediate. You got on a plane and you flew and you never left. You and I were in contact quite a bit about how we could serve them. I kept thinking, you've got to be one of the best friends that somebody can have in life. And you showed me that along the way in all of our mutual friendships and circles of trainings and all the social events of a friendship circle. But that incident, from the moment that happened, I felt like I got to meet the core of you. And I'll tell you what, if I get one Lifeline call and I'm about to win the $100 million prize, it's going to be you.
Thanks, Robyn. I can't let best friend number 4 go. The most valuable thing that we have in life is our relationships and the people in our lives. I'm so blessed. I have so many amazing, amazing good friends. Most of them that I've met through jiu-jitsu. I would say a majority of the closest people in my life I know through jiu-jitsu. But yeah, those relationships, there's no amount of money you can put on it. And so I'm so blessed. I know my friends would do the same for me. And so I have a very high standard to live up to because I have such amazing friends.
Thank you.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
Amazing.
Henry, as we near the end of an episode, we ask our guests some EQ quickfire questions about things that we're curious about. We know our listeners are curious about. So are you ready to play?
Yeah, sure.
Excellent. So, Henry, what is your contract?
I am a vulnerable, committed, connected man.
Yes, you are.
Deeply, deeply. Henry, I want to ask, what's one song that puts you immediately into a zone?
One song that puts me into a zone. Well, we have so many songs that we play at Choice. And I'll tell you what, I have a list of some of these songs on my Spotify. And I definitely know that when I listen to those particular songs, it puts me back into the training room, which is actually really cool.
The music is a touchstone.
It's amazing how, the music brings back emotions. It's really powerful.
Brings us right back into the experience. You know, it can be years later and we can remember that moment. I love that you shared that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll ask one more question that's in that lane. What is your favorite ever book that really transformed your life?
I think the first book that was really powerful for me in kind of the transformational world was The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. I don't know if you've ever read that.
I haven't read it, but I know who Bruce Lipton is.
Yeah, really powerful. And the reason that book resonated so much with me was because while I was doing jiu-jitsu, growing up in an Asian household, parents are very, very big on education. So my parents wanted me to be a doctor, like most Asian parents, a doctor or a lawyer or some type of engineer. My mom's family all came over from Vietnam after the war. They all came over. They were all in their 30s and they spoke no English. And every single one of my aunts and uncles either became a doctor or an engineer. So very high expectations for me where I get to kind of grow up in the US. So I was going to school for genetic engineering. And that book really resonated with me because he was a professor of genetics and molecular biology. The book is really about how your thoughts, your conscious thoughts can affect your biology. And so it was really one of the most powerful books that I've read. And we know that also in physics, your conscious thought affects matter and energy and things around you. And we're really big into the idea of manifesting. So that book, I think, was the first real kind of game changer for me.
Wow. Do you want to read that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've got to ask, because we just did a podcast with Fong, who I know that you know, about how she and her family left Vietnam and came to America. Yeah. Was your family a similar story or how'd they get here?
Well, yeah, my story is kind of crazy too. Not as tragic as hers. So my mom was pregnant with me. My mom was married to my dad. My dad was American, a U.S. citizen, and they were living in the United States. And she was pregnant with me. And at that time, she was pregnant with me. Everything was getting bad in Vietnam. Basically, the communists were getting ready to take over and the U.S. was pulling out. And so she went back to get her family out, to try to bring her family out. And my dad requested her not to go because she was pregnant, but she went anyways. And so she ended up having me in Vietnam. So I was the only one of my brothers. I have an older brother and a younger brother, but I was the only one born in Vietnam. And when she had me, she had to have me by C-section. So the crazy thing is there was no anesthesia left in the hospital, because it had all been used up on the soldiers. People were getting their arms and legs blown off, napalm, and so they had no anesthesia. And so the doctor put a rope in her mouth, and they had two nurses hold her arms apart, arms out. And back then, in those days, the C-section was from the belly button down. So they had to cut through all the muscle and then stitch her back up with no anesthesia. So yeah, pretty crazy.
Well, we're lucky that you're both there.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe that's why I'm so tough. Maybe it's my mom.
For the everyday person, not a fighter, not a black belt, what is a martial arts principle or mindset that we could apply in our daily life, especially in moments of challenge or pressure?
Well, I mean, one of the big things for us always is trying to stay calm under pressure and think through things. It's very difficult when you're frantic to make good choices. And so that's part of why we do train, is to start to become accustomed to and comfortable with a very, very chaotic, stressful environment. So yeah, I think in life, and this is so similar to jiu-jitsu, is whatever situation you're in, whatever you're going through, however bad it is, it's going to change and it can turn around, but you need to start making good choices. So whatever's going on in your life, wherever it is, however terrible things might be, the key is how do you dig yourself out of that, or how do you get in? The only way to do that is by making the choices, making decisions to take you where you want to go. And so that's the same thing that we do in jiu-jitsu all the time. Like, I've been in situations where I'm about to get submitted, someone's like on my back and they're choking me, and I realize like, hey, this is getting really bad. If I don't get out, if I don't do something quickly, I'm going to have to tap. And so I'd have to start making some adjustments and start moving my body and start adjusting to be able to not only deal with that situation right there in the moment, but there's been situations where I'm like almost getting submitted and then I end up getting out and then I end up getting into a good position. Then I end up winning the match because I made a bunch of poor choices. Basically, they're about to win. And now I start making good choices and then everything turns around and end up winning in jiu-jitsu. And I think it's the same thing in life. It's the more good choices that you make in succession consecutively, the better your life becomes, and the more poor choices you make in life in succession, the worse your life becomes.
You teach people around the world, Henry, and what makes you a great teacher is you're always evolving yourself. You're very disciplined with yourself. So you must have some non-negotiable daily disciplines that keep you grounded, sharp, always growing. That's clear to us as friends. Can you share those with us?
Yeah. So one of the big things for me is when you're talking about growth, I try to do something good for myself mentally, spiritually, and physically every day. And so on the physical side, that's a workout. I want to get in a workout every day, whether it's jiu-jitsu, whether it's going to the gym, whether it's stretching to work on my body to increase mobility, whether it's doing cardio. So do something for myself physically every day. Mentally, I like to read, or sometimes I'll go down rabbit holes. Nowadays, what's amazing with the internet is you can learn about any subject you want to just on your computer, on your phone. So there's different subjects that I'm very interested in. And so I'm really big in learning on those subjects. Like, so I'll go on YouTube and watch videos from all the top people, the smartest people in the world on different subjects. And some of the things I'm interested in is science, health. I try to learn history, personal development, obviously is a big thing. Relationships is one that I have been doing a deep dive on in the last year, just understanding male, female energy and the dynamics of male, female relationships. And I think we're at such a crazy time in the world now, how that male-female relationship and dynamic is changing so much. Like, the traditional relationships are evolving a lot. It's not the same as when I was growing up, or not the same as the example my parents set for me. So I'm really trying to understand that better. But yeah, I try to read a little bit every day or learn something. And then for spirituality, meditation has been really big for me. I have done a couple 10-day meditation retreats, 10-day silent meditation retreats. For me, I feel my meditation practice just really grounds me.
Meditation is such an important part of our practices, I believe. I'm with you, Henry. And I found, especially early in my career, I've been doing this for 26 years. And I found early that I could not meditate at all. I could not quiet my voice. It's not easy. And I just thought I don't have that skill until I started working with teachers of meditation. And I remember the first time I actually got through a silent meditation, which was only an hour. I just thought, what a triumph. And we just have to keep practicing.
Well, that's why it's a practice, right? Like, the meditation is a practice, and it's just like anything else. Like, you'll have good days and you'll have bad days, but the key is to do it over time, and you'll grow in the practice. But it's not healthy to compare it. And 10-day silent meditation, it's one of the most difficult things I've done. But again, I think the goal with that is to kind of in life, don't beat yourself up too much and just realize like, hey, this is a practice, and just keep sticking to it and keep doing it, and it will get better.
So for the non-martial arts people that will be listening, and we've mostly got graduates listening, in moments especially of challenge and pressure, do you have any other practices that are especially effective for you that you would recommend?
Jiu-jitsu is been kind of the biggest thing that's helped me with that. So I might be beating the dead horse, but I mean, the practice of jiu-jitsu is to learn to be comfortable in an environment where you have another human being physically trying to dominate you. So that's, for most human beings, innately and very primalistically, is probably one of the most stressful things that could possibly happen. Another human being attacking you and basically trying to dominate you and submit you, choke you unconscious, or break your arm or break your leg. Most people are not comfortable with that. And in jiu-jitsu, the whole training is to train so that it does become comfortable. So for me, that environment is someone attacking me. I've been doing it so long, like on a daily basis for 30 years now. It's so comfortable. I let people like choke me and grab me. I'm very comfortable because I know that if all I need to do is make some good choices and I can turn things around. And that's, I think, why so many very, very successful people really love jiu-jitsu, because it teaches that specifically how to be calm and collected in very, very high stress environments. Because in those environments, you have to make very good choices, sometimes very quickly, to be able to get out of things, especially when things are going south really fast. You have to think quick, and that's with jiu-jitsu. You have to be very quick. You have to think very quickly, and you have to be constantly making good choices. I know so many just crazy, crazy successful people that also train.
Robyn and I have a good friend who's a chef, Tyler Florence, and he got asked to go on a show where the Navy SEALs train you or whatever.
Mhm.
So he decided he needed to be in shape for that. And so he thought, I'll take a couple weeks of jiu-jitsu training. He's been doing it for like 2 years religiously now. Like he fell in love with it. So
Doesn't
yeah,
surprise me.
a lot of people love it. A lot of people love it. If this inspires someone to want to start learning about the art of jiu-jitsu, how would they begin?
What I would recommend is go on Google, find a couple schools that are close in your area, and usually most schools will give people either an introductory class or you can go in and watch a class. So I would go in and talk to the instructors, watch a class, because there might be a couple good schools in the area, there might not be any good schools, but what will happen is different people will resonate with different kinds of instruction with different instructors. And so I always say, go in and watch or check out a couple classes or take a class and see what you think. Don't sign up at the first school. Make sure you go to 2 or 3 schools, because a lot of schools, the vibe can be very, very different at a lot of different schools. Some schools are a lot more aggressive. Some schools are a lot more like chill and relaxed. And some schools focus more on fighting. Some schools focus more on self-defense. Some schools are very sport focused. So you want to make sure that whatever you're looking for, that it's going to meet those expectations for you.
Fantastic. Thank you. And as we close out our episodes, we always have our guests create an EQ stretch challenge for our listeners to take on in between the drops of each episode. So if you were to design a stretch for listeners and grads that test their resilience, something maybe related to the martial arts, what's a stretch that you want to offer to our grads?
You stumped me on this one. On the spot, obviously I want it to be valuable. I mean, my favorite stretch, maybe this just because it makes me feel good, is just going through my closet. I take out everything that I don't need and I basically go hand it out to homeless people, but I also interact with them on a personal level and I talk with them. And so instead of dropping it off at a store, like a Goodwill or something like that, I basically take it and hand deliver it to people that need it. So that one is always really powerful for me. And because the human interaction, the realizing that as human beings, we're not so different and we're not that far apart. I'm so thankful afterwards, like whatever I might be going through, whatever struggles I might be having, it pales in comparison. It's so insignificant after I've done that.
I love that's what came forth for you. No one's offered that or thought of that. And I have to say, it makes sense that that's what you would bring forward, because you are so humble and so giving. And so many people do generously drop off at Goodwill. But I believe that that human interaction, that what that translates to that person sitting or living on the street at that time, that is a way bigger value than whatever sweater or coat that we're handling them. And hopefully people hearing you, you'll inspire a whole bunch of people to follow you.
So Christmas and Thanksgiving, I take the kids to do that because I want them to understand how good they have life. And so I'm with the kids. I had a brand new pair of Nike shoes. I hadn't worn them. I've had them for about a year. And I'm driving around and I see a homeless guy walking. I said, "Hey man, what size shoes do you wear?" And he was like 9.5. I was like, "Oh, perfect. I got some shoes for you. Would you like some Nikes?" So I opened up the box for him and he started crying. And he's like, "Can I give you a hug, man?" I was like, "Yes, of course, these are for you." But like literally, like me and my kids, I'm just like, man, these have been sitting in my closet for a year. I haven't worn them, right? I bought them and I just never wore them. And I'm like, I'm going to give these away to someone. And he was like, "Man, I was praying to God." He said, "I needed some shoes." I've just had so many events like that have happened when I go do that. It's almost like God talking to you, you know?
I think that's exactly what it is. We get to make up stuff, so why don't we make up stuff that works, right?
Yeah.
Henry, thank you. I love the stretch.
Cool. It's an easy one. Everybody has stuff in their closet that they don't need. So win-win. Get rid of stuff that you don't need that's just taking up room and, bless someone else.
I have one more question along that line, and that's in today's podcast with you. Is there anything that we didn't get to today that you want to share with our grads and our listeners as your final thoughts?
No, I'm just thinking that I'll probably be on again. And so there's obviously more to share. I enjoyed the conversation and hope we can do it again.
Well, we'll just give you an invitation right now. We can't wait to have you on for our repeat second guest.
I said I would love that. I would love to be back on. Thank you so much. It's been nice.
You're
Yeah.
absolutely a master. You are a huge contributor here. You've made a big difference for students, like every time you coach, but also just when you're in the training room, sharing your wisdom and your unique perspective through the lens of all the extraordinary insights you have from jiu-jitsu and the martial arts. So thank you, Henry, for all you've done.
Yeah.
And actually, thank you for all you've done in the world, because you touch a lot of people, and we've been gifted with you and your circle of friends in martial arts to have so many martial artists come to us, families and so forth, that we've met because of all of you. You just are an amazing giver. And thank you also for sharing your journey in such an intimate way, Henry, because the big thing about EQ is, you've heard me say this, my vulnerability, it's probably the last thing, if I think about it, that I want to share. But in fact, it's the first thing I want to hear from someone else. And something I was thinking from the time you started sharing today is, you live in your vulnerability and you come from there, and you're so giving of yourself. And you're just such an inspiring guy. I feel like I want to say, come on over to ChoiceCenter and let's have a martial arts class once every couple months with a graduate like you, that everybody would come and love to hear like an orientation about the parallels. And then they'll have to go out on your stretch and interview a couple martial arts studios.
Yeah, that would be fun. I'd love that.
All right, you're on.
Let's declare it. I love it.
Dream, declare, deliver.
That's right. Thank you so much, Henry. We will have you back soon.
Okay, thanks, Robyn. Thanks, Corrine.
We love you. Thank you.
New episodes of EQU release every Tuesday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Podbean, and ChoiceCenter.com. See you next week.